was a romantic live-action film that was made in 1998 and was directed by Annie Tennant. This movie presented a more modern take on Cinderella, although it was still set in ancient times, in this case Renaissance-era France, and it starred Drew Barrymore and Angelica Houston. Now, before I get into what I liked and hated about this film, I would like to give a brief summary on this film. Basically, this movie started off with the Grand Dame of France summoning the Brothers Grimm, and she starts telling them the real story of Cinderella. The real story of Cinderella starts off with a young girl named Danielle de Barbarac living with her father Augusta, and how Danielle ended up getting a new stepmother who is known as the Baroness Ramila de Ghent, who happens to have two daughters named Marguerite and Jacqueline. One tragic day, however, Danielle's father ends up dying of a heart attack, and in his dying breath showed Danielle his love for her instead of for Ramilia. This then causes Ramilia to be hostile towards Danielle for the next 10 years, to the point where she forces Danielle to become a servant in her household, despite the fact that Danielle is her stepdaughter. However, one day, Danielle, who dressed up as the Comtesse Nicole de Lancre, which was her real mother's name, in order to free a servant who once worked for her stepmother, ends up meeting Henry, the Crown Prince of France, and the two ended up falling in love with each other. But what happens once Prince Henry discovers the real truth about Danielle, and will they still get their happily ever after? What can I say? When I watched this movie when it first came out, I was just so amazed at the beautiful storytelling and the characters that this film had to offer. But what really made me love this movie was the fact that we get a strong female protagonist playing the Cinderella role. Drew Barrymore did a fantastic job at playing the role of the lead character Danielle de Barbarac, and I love the fact that Danielle was shown as being an independent and strong character, while at the same time being very passionate and gentle towards other people. It really made me relate strongly to her character, and during the moments where Danielle speaks out her mind and defends her beliefs in true love, I just cheer for her throughout the movie, as she was determined to get her happily ever after. I really enjoy Angelica Houston's performance as Danielle's stepmother, Ramilia, as she was a truly cruel character and was the perfect foil towards Danielle's optimism and finding true love and being free from Ramilia. The moments shown between Ramilia and Danielle were both heartbreaking and fantastic to see, as Ramilia clearly despises Danielle, and Danielle has to do everything in her power to stand up to Ramilia in order to get her happily ever after. I also love the way that both Megan Dodds and Marlene Linsky both portray Ramilia's two stepdaughters, Marguerite and Jacqueline. Megan Dodds did a fantastic job at playing the role of Marguerite, as Marguerite was seen as being a truly manipulative character, and Megan Dodds did a fantastic job at portraying Marguerite's usual temper tantrums. Marlene Linsky was brilliant at the clumsy yet kind-hearted Jacqueline, and I love seeing the relationship that Jacqueline shares with Danielle, as it's rare that I see a version of Cinderella where at least one of the stepsisters was a kind-hearted character. Dougray Scott did a great job of playing the role of Prince Henry, as Henry is shown as being an intelligent yet uninspired prince that finds out that true love can truly change a person's life for the better. Dougray Scott breathed life into Henry's character, as his performance is full of charm and humor that I couldn't help but love Henry in this film. I also love the Renaissance-era feel of this movie, and even though the heroine in the story is a much more modern interpretation of the classic fairy tale heroine, this movie is still set in an ancient era that brilliantly captures the spirit of the original fairy tale. But the best part about this movie was the developing romance between Danielle and Prince Henry. I love the fact that this movie took this time to really explore the relationship between Prince Henry and Danielle, and how this relationship has helped both Henry and Danielle mature into better characters. In this film, Prince Henry started off as a spoiled prince who was bored by his princely duties, and never thought twice about how his decisions would affect his country. However, it was only after Henry spent some time with Danielle and learned more about the world through her eyes that Henry becomes a much better character during the film. Because of this, Danielle and Henry's relationship with each other felt so natural to me, because they spent the majority of the film trying to get to know each other, and it made their relationship even more genuine than what I would normally see out of any other romantic film. I also love the playfulness that both Danielle and Henry showed to each other, as it really made their relationship adorable to look at, and even more so relatable towards the audience. If there was an issue I had with this film, it was the fact that I felt that the film sometimes would go through the plot a bit too fast. There were moments in the film where I wished that they would have expanded more on the character's background, especially with Ramilia and her daughters. Like, who was Ramilia married to before she met Danielle's father? And did Ramilia even care about Danielle's father? We know that Ramilia is a baroness, but which baron was she married to, and how did her previous husband treat her? I know this isn't really important to the plot of the film, but to me, it would have explained a lot more about the characters' backgrounds if topics like this was covered a bit more in the film. Ever After was rated PG according to the VH tape I currently own. but it is now re-rated PG-13 for momentary strong language, even though the only strong language uttered in this film was when the S-bomb was dropped one time. Other than that, the language wasn't too bad in this film, save for a few of the less offensive words being dropped here and there. Overall, I give Ever After a 9 out of 10. I took off a point because, once again, I wish that the film would have covered the characters' background histories a bit more so that we would have had a good idea about where these characters are coming from. But despite that, this was a truly fantastic film that provided a female protagonist that was not only strong and independent, but was caring and passive. And those characteristics created one of the best versions of Cinderella around. I would highly recommend this film to anyone who is a fan of the Cinderella stories and would love to see a more modern take on the classic fairy tale. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen this film, then you might want to watch this movie before you see this section. However, if you have seen this film and you want to know my opinions on this spoiler, then keep watching. In the scene where Henry starts apologizing to Danielle for treating her so badly, when Romelia exposes Danielle as a fraud in front of Henry during the ball, I was slightly put off by how quickly the film tried to resolve the problem between Danielle and Henry after that incident. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the moment where Henry was apologizing to Danielle and was still willing to marry her even after he discovered that she was a servant. But I was sort of expecting Danielle to tell Henry how much his words hurt her, and also for Henry to go into detail about how he doesn't care if Danielle was a servant or not. She changed his life in ways that made him into a better person, and he loved her for that. I would have loved it if the film had stretched that scene a bit further, so we could get the full impact of Henry and Danielle's confession of love for each other, but that's just my opinion on this matter. Well, that's my movie review on Ever After, and be sure to check out more of my videos in the near future. This is Rabbitearsblog, and I'll see you later.